All right, we got cut off with our video, so we'll pick this up again. Images for the web. We're talking about pixel-based images, and so I've got my sample image here, and we're talking about resolution, and again our image size gives us some useful information here. So 72 pixels per inch. That would come out to 56 inches by 42 inches. So this would be a big picture at 72 pixels per inch. Again, if I go back to pixels, really the more pixels, the more information. I could change that in various ways, but what I want to look at is something here on about this Mac. And if I go to displays, this is telling me my laptop has a display of 2,880 pixels by 1,800 pixels. And so that is not 72 pixels per inch. It's about, I believe the display on this is 220 pixels per inch. So if I change this to 220, by default it then increases the number of pixels, and it just makes them up. So let's put it back to where it was, which was 40, 36, I believe. Or was it 26? We'll do 26. Doesn't matter too much. So now all I've changed is the resolution. It's the same number of pictures, so there's really the same amount of detail. It just means that now if I switch to inches, let me not do that. Oh, why is it giving me all this? All right, so we'll go back here. We're switching it. 40, 26. Then I put my cursor down here and change this to inches. And it's telling me now it's a smaller image in terms of inches. But again, that only depends, it only means inches if I happen to have a device that is displaying at 220 pixels per inch. If a device is displaying 72 pixels per inch, it's going to be a much bigger picture. But I will notice more or less resolution in the image itself. So 220 is fairly high. And if I could put this on a web page with a screen with this resolution, I could make it 18 inches wide, which is a little wider than my screen right now, and still have a high quality image. So let's go back to 72. And again, if we look at pixels, we'll set that back to our 4026. And now we're back where we started. So if I'm not sure what size I want this to be on my web page, then I basically take my original and I make sure that I'm at 72 pixels per inch, and I either write down or make a mental note of how wide this is, and that's how big I could make it on my web page without a loss of detail. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to just go ahead and save this. It's really where we were in the beginning, but I'm going to do a save as. When I do that, this is where I get my choice of formats, and the ones we want in general are JPEG. We'll talk more about these other two later, but right now we don't need those. Up here is GIF or GIF, and it says CompuServe GIF. CompuServe was a pre-web computer network service that people subscribed to, and at some point they owned the rights to the image format, that GIF. And some other company has since acquired CompuServe, but the name still shows up here. It's actually a proprietary format, which means somebody owns it. JPEG is an open source, as is PNG. Nobody owns those. It doesn't really affect us, but it means at some point Adobe's probably paying whatever corporate entity now owns GIF some money to use their format, but we don't as users. Okay. So I'm going to cancel that. And to save our images for the web, a more useful way to do it is to go down to Export and use Save for the Web, which is Option-Shift-Command-S, if you can remember that. Just hold down all the keys. It says Legacy, but it's still the most useful way to save for the web. What it does is gives us a preview of the original image. You can move that around, if I could, to get whatever area you want. And so here it is as a JPEG. And so in JPEG, we've got a quality setting. And if we look at it here, it can go from 0 up to 100. Not, if my keyboard would keep up, it would. So that's my my setting. There's also a little slider, so that's 100, that's 0. And we'll put it somewhere around the middle, okay? 50, 52, close enough. For now, we just want to optimize. We'll talk about these things later. This doesn't really mean anything right now. And there it is. So we can see it, it looks very much like the original. But if I look at the file size, my original is 34 megabytes, which is big. And this is 2.9, almost 3 megabytes. So much smaller. It's like less than 1/10 the size of the original. I can also compare that to another format or another setting. If I turn the quality down to, now it's at 15, my file size is down to 1.12 megabytes. So again, about 1/3 the size of this quality. And the image doesn't look all that different. If I look at them, I see a little less detail in some areas, but overall not that different. And here, with the image down to 7, it's down to 983, and so it's going to load faster. It's a much smaller file. We can also, in our preview, I could say, all right, what if this was a PNG? So I'll use PNG 24, and for some reason it's going slowly, but it does it. Okay, and now I look at it. And what I want to notice is my file size has jumped up to 21 megabytes. So it's much bigger. Presumably I've got more detail. I've got the possibility of transparency. But again, looking at these, I don't see that much difference. And to be that much bigger is a not good, really. It just, if I have a bunch of images like that, it's going to take them a long time to load in the browser. And we've got some other choices here we'll talk about another time. But so same size, but that way I can compare them. And let's take a look at a GIF. I'll just pick the top one. We'll talk about these more in detail later. So this one I've gone to a GIF. It's still much bigger than my JPEGs, 5.7 megabytes. Right now my color's looking not very good because the way a GIF makes a file smaller is by limiting the number of colors the pixels can have. Each pixel is limited, in this case, to 128 possible colors. And there's some different settings here you can try. And colors. So the maximum is 256. So if I set it for 256, I get a better looking image because it's got more colors to choose from, but it's 8.24 megabytes, so still much bigger. And there are some advantages to GIF that we'll talk about later, but I'll mention a couple things now. One is you can have a kind of transparency, but it's only one color, one of these 256 colors that can be transparent, and that has some consequences. Secondly, there's such a thing called an animated GIF, and you can make some simple little animations that you can't do with JPEG or PNG. So I picked the one I want. In this case, I would probably go with maybe a little more quality than that, but not much. Somewhere around 25 is fine. and I'm just going to go ahead and save that. And I'll call it Canon 2, just so I remember it. And I'll save that in my photo with my other things. So once I've saved it, then I want to put it on my web page. And we'll go through that in the next session, and then we'll do the same thing with several different pictures so we can see what happens when we start out with different size originals. So that'll be the end of this one, and we'll get back to player.